A single leather-bound book survived the Spanish conquest to rewrite Mayan history. These ancient codices are not just books, they are time capsules of shattered wisdom, and the discovery of just 25 of them has fundamentally redefined our knowledge of the entire ancient world. By the end of this journey, you will understand how fragile pages challenged everything we thought we knew, revealing lost sciences and preserving voices silenced for centuries. We will uncover how a manuscript found in a Dresden library forced scholars to abandon the myth of primitive American civilizations. You will see how a text written in silver and gold ink saved a language from total oblivion. This exploration proves the past is never truly gone, and that more forgotten archives likely wait to be found. What forgotten story from the ancient world would you most want to see recovered from the dust tucked away in a Dresden library, far from the jungles it once called home? A single book waited for centuries to tell its story. This is the Dresden Codex, a Mayan masterpiece created around the 13th century. It is one of perhaps only 4 known Maya books to survive the Spanish campaigns of destruction, where countless others were burned as works of the devil. Its very existence is a miracle, a direct whisper from a world Europeans tried to erase. This is not merely an artifact, it is a comprehensive scientific document. Within its intricately painted pages, written in a complex system of glyphs, lies a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos that stuns modern scholars. The Codex contains incredibly precise astronomical tables, particularly for the planet Venus. The Maya tracked its cycles with an accuracy that would not be matched in Europe for hundreds of years. They could predict solar eclipses with remarkable skill, viewing these celestial events not just as spectacles, but as vital components of a sacred, ordered universe. The book itself is a long, continuous strip of fig bark paper, folded like a screen and coated with a fine stucco, allowing for vivid illustrations and text. Think of it as both a priestly manual and an astronomical almanac. Its charts did more than track stars. They dictated the timing of sacred ceremonies, guided agricultural planting and harvesting, and provided a complete cosmological map for Mayan life. This single surviving codex single-handedly shattered the colonial myth of primitive American cultures. It revealed a civilization with a scientific tradition, especially in mathematics and astronomy, that rivaled any in the ancient world. It forces us to ask a haunting question. If this one book could redefine history, what magnificent libraries of New World knowledge were lost to the flames? What other sciences, philosophies, and stories turned to ash, leaving this lone survivor to hint at the vast intellectual world we can never fully recover? From this astronomical marvel, we journey now to a text that performed a different kind of miracle, not by charting the stars, but by saving a language from total silence. While the Dresden Codex preserved a science of the stars, another treasure safeguarded the very soul of a people. The Codex Argenteus is a breathtaking object, a 6th century manuscript that feels almost too magnificent to be real. Its pages are a deep, regal purple, and upon them the sacred text of the Gospels is inscribed not in common ink, but in shimmering silver and brilliant gold. This was not merely a book, it was a royal declaration, a physical embodiment of a culture fighting for its identity. It is the most extensive surviving text in the Gothic language, the tongue of the Visigoths, a people whose written legacy was nearly wiped from history by time and conquest. The words themselves were translated by Bishop Wulfila, a man who faced an enormous challenge. The Gothic language had no alphabet, So, to write his translation, Wulfila first had to invent one, crafting a new script from Greek and Latin letters to give his people the Bible in their own voice. This act of creation in the face of cultural extinction is what makes the Codex so vital. For linguists, it is a Rosetta Stone for an entire branch of the Germanic language family. It provides the foundational sounds and grammar, allowing scholars to trace how languages evolved and split across Europe. Without this single, glorious book, the Gothic language would be little more than a handful of fragmentary inscriptions, its true sound and structure lost forever. Its journey was as dramatic as its appearance, created most likely in a scriptorium in Ravenna, the heart of the late Roman Empire. It traveled north through the upheavals of the migration period. It was eventually rediscovered centuries later in a monastery library, a shimmering ghost from a forgotten world. This codex forces us to completely reconsider what we mean by barbarian. The Visigoths are often remembered only for the sack of Rome in the year 410, depicted as destructive hordes, but the Codex Argenteus reveals a people with a rich intellectual and spiritual life, capable of creating works of stunning artistry and profound religious devotion. It proves that a culture's legacy is not just written in its battles, but in its books. How does the survival of a single language, preserved through a religious text, shatter our simplistic stereotypes of ancient tribes? This magnificent volume does more than save a language, it restores the dignity of a civilization. From this act of linguistic salvation, we now turn to a text that captured not a single language, but the entire tumultuous spirit of an era poised between two worlds. A routine search for fertilizer in the Egyptian desert in 1945 unearthed a sealed jar, its contents far more valuable than any soil. An Egyptian farmer, digging near the town of Nag Hammadi, struck not rock but clay, pulling a large, intact earthenware jar from the earth. Hoping for gold, he instead found 13 leather-bound books made of papyrus. This accidental discovery was the Nag Hammadi Library, a collection of over 50 texts that would violently crack open the established narrative of early Christianity. These were not orthodox scriptures, but Gnostic Gospels, radical works that had been hunted, suppressed, and buried for 1,500 years. They presented a Christianity utterly different from the one that came to dominate the Roman world. Here were texts like the Gospel of Thomas, a collection of sayings of Jesus that emphasized internal revelation over institutional faith, and the Gospel of Truth, a poetic meditation on knowledge and error. These writings belonged to diverse Christian movements that the growing church authority had declared heretical, their voices systematically silenced. The core of their belief was gnosis, a Greek word for knowledge, but not the intellectual kind. This was a secret, spiritual knowledge of the self and the divine, a direct personal path to salvation that bypassed bishops and creeds. It was an inward awakening, a recognition of the divine spark trapped within a flawed material world. The texts delve into complex cosmological myths, describing a universe filled with divine emanations and a lower, ignorant creator God who fashioned the imperfect physical realm. Central to many of these stories is the figure of Sophia, whose name means wisdom. She is a powerful, sometimes tragic, embodiment of divine thought whose actions set the cosmos in motion, illustrating that the divine was often seen as both masculine and feminine, a concept later orthodoxy would largely erase. The existence of this entire library forced a complete reassessment of Christian history. It proved that the first few centuries were not a period of unified doctrine, but a vibrant, chaotic, and fiercely contested landscape of ideas. What does the survival of these lost Gospels tell us about the nature of religious authority? It reveals that the formation of the biblical canon was a long and contentious process, a winnowing of many voices where one tradition's truth became another's heresy. The Nag Hammadi Codices restore a lost dimension to a critical period, reminding us that history is written by the victors, but sometimes the voices of the silenced are waiting in a jar to be heard. From this profound spiritual heterodoxy, we now turn to a codex that reveals a different kind of ancient genius, one focused not on the soul, but on the practical, healing science of the body. A royal commission for a princess produced one of history's most vital medical texts. The Vienna Dioscurides, created in the imperial capital of Constantinople during the 6th century, is a breathtaking fusion of science and art. Its pages are filled with vibrantly painted illustrations of plants, animals, and minerals, each image rendered with a naturalistic precision that feels centuries ahead of its time. This was not a book meant for a dusty library shelf. It was a practical manual for healing, a direct link to the work of the 1st century Greek physician Archimedes Dioscorides. His text De Materia Medica was the definitive pharmacological guide for over 1,500 years, and this particular copy ensured its knowledge would endure. The Codex organized hundreds of substances, primarily plants, detailing their therapeutic properties and precise instructions for preparing everything from pain-relieving salves to powerful antidotes. It was a complete system of medicine based on centuries of observation and practice. The accuracy of its illustrations was not merely decorative, it was the very key to the text's long survival and utility. A physician in a distant city could confidently identify a specific herb, like the mandrake root with its human-like shape or the distinct leaves of the opium poppy, because the artists captured their true form. This visual fidelity transformed the book from a passive repository into an active diagnostic tool, used at the bedsides of the sick for generations. It formed the unshakable bedrock of early modern pharmacy. How does this meticulous illustration of nature represent a different form of scientific inquiry? It shows a world where empirical observation and artistic beauty were inseparable partners in the pursuit of knowledge. The survival of this single codex meant the empirical wisdom of the Greco-Roman world was not lost during the so-called Dark Ages. Instead, it was carefully preserved, studied, and expanded within the Byzantine Empire, becoming a critical bridge that carried classical science toward the Renaissance. This living archive reminds us that science once advanced through the patient hand of a scribe and the discerning eye of a painter. From this foundational text that healed the body, we now move to a codex that defined the very soul of a nation, a legal document that would shape a culture for a millennium. Gold and ivory announced a new empire's divine right to rule. The Lorsch Gospels, created in the scriptorium of Charlemagne's court around the year 810, is a breathtaking declaration of power. Its covers are masterpieces of carved ivory, depicting scenes from the life of Christ with a classical elegance deliberately revived from ancient Rome. Its pages shimmer with gold leaf and brilliant pigments, the script a perfect example of the new Carolingian minuscule, a clear and elegant handwriting that would standardize writing across Europe. This was not just a book to be read, it was a sacred object to be witnessed, a physical embodiment of the Carolingian Renaissance. Charlemagne's project was not merely political, it was a conscious cultural rebirth. He recruited the finest scholars and artists to his court to recreate the glory of the Roman Empire, now fused with Christian faith. The Lorsch Gospels is the pinnacle of this effort. Its art is a direct dialogue with Roman and Byzantine models, borrowing their authority to legitimize the new Holy Roman Empire. For a population that was largely illiterate, the imagery itself was the message. The intricate canon tables, which harmonized the four Gospels into a single architectural framework, were not just reference tools. They were visual sermons demonstrating the unity and order of the Christian world under one emperor and one God. Yet the true historical weight of this object extends beyond its lavish decoration. Preserved within its bindings for centuries was another text, the Lorsch Codex. This was a cartulary, a meticulous record of the monastery's extensive land holdings, legal privileges, and economic transactions. These dry, administrative details are an invaluable window into the real world of the early Middle Ages. They show us how a major religious institution managed its vast estates, settled disputes, and interacted with everyone from emperors to local farmers. This combination of supreme art and pragmatic record-keeping in one object is what makes the Lorsch Gospels so revealing. It proves that imperial power, artistic genius, and economic administration were not separate spheres, but tightly woven threads in the same fabric. The Gospel book projected celestial authority, while the cartulary documented the earthly wealth that made that authority possible. How does a book used for both prayer and property deeds redefine our understanding of medieval kingship? It shows that to rule was to perform, using splendor to inspire awe and documents to enforce control. This codex is a perfect artifact of a world where the spiritual and the secular were inseparable partners in power. From this fusion of imperial ambition and sacred art, we journey to the highlands of Ethiopia, where a codex chronicled a lineage of legendary kings. A single sacred lineage traced across parchment defined an empire for 600 years. In the highlands of Ethiopia, the Kebra Nagast, or Glory of the Kings, stands as the nation's foundational epic. Compiled in its current form during the 14th century, this codex is far more than a historical record. It is a masterful tapestry woven from biblical lore, local tradition, and political theology, designed to give the Ethiopian Solomonic dynasty an unshakable divine mandate. The text presents a breathtaking narrative of origins, linking Ethiopia's emperors directly to the legendary union of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Their son, Menelik I, is the pivotal figure who, according to the story, traveled to Jerusalem and returned to Ethiopia with a sacred treasure of immeasurable power. This was the Ark of the Covenant, the very chest containing the original stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. For the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, this was not a metaphor but a physical and spiritual reality. The belief that the Ark resides in a chapel in Axum to this day forms the bedrock of a unique Christian identity that developed in isolation for nearly 2 millennia. The ideological power of this story cannot be overstated. It provided a continuous line of legitimacy for Ethiopian rulers, framing them as the rightful heirs to a biblical throne, chosen by God to rule a new promised land. This was a powerful counter-narrative to European traditions that often minimized or ignored Africa's role in sacred history. The Kebra Nagast placed the continent at the very center of divine action, as the chosen repository for the world's most holy object. How does a single story preserved in a codex forge an identity strong enough to resist colonial pressure? It creates an unbreakable cultural spine, a sense of destiny and divine favor that external forces could not easily dismantle. When scholars from the wider world began to study the Kebra Nagast, they uncovered the profound depth of a Christian tradition that had evolved independently, with its own interpretations and practices. This codex revealed a kingdom that saw itself not as a peripheral outpost of faith, but as a new Zion, a central actor in a global spiritual drama. Its survival is a testament to the power of a story to shape a nation's soul. From this epic of sacred kingship and a continent's central role in a divine plan, we now turn our gaze upward to a codex that mapped the heavens from a completely different cultural perspective. A Spanish viceroy in a conquered city demanded a report for his king. The result was the Codex Mendoza, a book born from the ashes of the Aztec Empire. Created in Mexico City around 1541, just 2 decades after the fall of Tenochtitlan, this document is a profound paradox. It was commissioned by the first viceroy of New Spain to explain the civilization he was dismantling to Emperor Charles V, and it was compiled by indigenous scribes who had witnessed their world collapse. It stands as a bridge between 2 eras, a Rosetta Stone for a culture under erasure. The Codex is ingeniously structured in 3 distinct parts, each a vital chapter of the Aztec story. The first section is a dynastic history, a pictorial account of Aztec rulers and their conquests, showing the expansion of their power decade by decade. The second part is a stark economic record, a tribute list from hundreds of conquered provinces. Here, pictograms detail the exact taxes paid, from bundles of quetzal feathers and jade beads to bags of cocoa beans and jaguar skins, revealing the immense wealth that flowed into the capital. The third section is perhaps the most intimate, a breathtakingly detailed depiction of daily life from birth to old age. It shows the rituals of child rearing, the strict discipline of education, and the trades and professions people entered, offering a window into the human experience of the Aztec world. The very format of the Codex reveals a deep cultural tension. The images are drawn in the traditional pre-Columbian pictographic style, a visual language that recorded information without alphabetic writing. Yet surrounding these indigenous images are annotations written in Spanish, explanations provided for a European audience that could not read the symbols. This creates a layered narrative, one where the authentic voice of the Aztec informant speaks through its art, while the Spanish text frames and sometimes filters that voice for foreign consumption. How do we read a document where the pictures tell one story and the captions might tell another? The Codex Mendoza is a captured memory, a portrait of a civilization drawn by its own people under the direction of its conquerors. It preserves knowledge that would have otherwise been lost in the violent upheaval of conquest, yet it also reminds us that our view of the Aztecs is seen through a colonial lens. This invaluable record forces us to listen carefully for the authentic whispers of the past that survive within it. From this complex portrait of a fallen empire, we journey to the deserts of Egypt, where a different codex captures another moment of profound cultural transition, bridging the gap between a fading paganism and a rising Christianity. Another sealed jar, buried in the same sands of Upper Egypt that yielded the Nag Hammadi Library, held a different kind of key to the past. The Crosby-Schøyen Codex, a Coptic manuscript from the 3rd or 4th century, is a physical bridge to a pivotal moment in history. It is one of the oldest books in the world, not merely a scroll but a true codex, with its pages bound together along one edge. This seemingly simple technological shift from scroll to book was a revolution. It made texts more portable, more durable, and far easier to reference, perfectly suited for a new faith that was spreading its teachings across continents. Within its covers lies an early version of the Book of Jonah and the first epistle of Peter, written in the Sahidic dialect of Coptic. This was the language of everyday Christians in southern Egypt, a direct translation of Greek scriptures for a local audience. For textual critics, the Codex is a frozen moment in time, capturing the New Testament before its words were fully standardized. Minor variations in its phrasing reveal a living tradition where texts were copied by hand and circulated among communities who were still debating and defining their beliefs. Its construction is a marvel of early bookmaking. The entire codex is a single quire, meaning it was formed from one large stack of papyrus sheets folded and sewn together into a single, thick booklet. You can almost picture a scribe in a dusty monastery, carefully assembling this new form of technology to serve a new faith. How does the physical form of a book, its binding and script, inform our understanding of the community that produced it? It tells us they were practical, organized, and deeply committed to spreading their sacred texts in a format built to last. The Crosby-Schøyen Codex is not just a religious document, it is a testament to a vibrant literary culture flourishing in Egypt, a snapshot of Christianity taking root and creating its own tools for survival. This humble book marks the moment Scripture became truly mobile. Its ideas carried not in rolled parchment, but in the compact, resilient form that would dominate knowledge for the next 2 millennia. From this foundational snapshot of early faith and technology, we encounter a codex of an entirely different scale, one that sought to contain not just a few books, but the entirety of human and divine knowledge. A single monk in a Flemish monastery decided he could bind the entire universe between 2 covers. The Liber Floridus, or Book of Flowers, is the sprawling 12th century encyclopedia compiled by Canon Lambert of St. Omer, a breathtakingly ambitious attempt to summarize everything known from the moment of creation to the final apocalypse. This was not a book of new discoveries, but a magnificent garden of collected wisdom, where every branch of knowledge was pruned and arranged to reveal a single divine plan. Lambert gathered history and geography, astronomy and theology, excerpts from classical authors and the Church Fathers, weaving them together into a single, intricate tapestry of understanding. He included one of the earliest detailed maps of Europe, not as a mere geographical tool, but as a stage upon which sacred history unfolded. His pages are filled with schematic diagrams, most famously the Wheel of Fortune, a powerful visual metaphor for the rise and fall of kings and empires, reminding the reader that all worldly power was transient under the gaze of God. What is truly revealing is the content he chose to include. The Liber Floridus places factual accounts from Roman historians right alongside legendary material, like the story of Alexander the Great being lifted into the sky by griffins. To the modern mind, this seems like a confusion of fact and fiction, but to Lambert, it was all part of the same truth. These stories held moral and symbolic meaning, and thus they had a place in his grand scheme. This codex is the quintessential medieval worldview captured in vellum and ink. It shows a mind that sought not to challenge authority, but to organize and preserve it, to create a unified system where every piece of information, whether from Pliny the Elder or the Book of Revelation, found its harmonious place. The intellectual ambition was not to pioneer new frontiers, but to build a perfect, complete library for the soul, a memory aid and teaching tool for a monastic audience living in a world ordered by faith. What does this monumental effort to contain all knowledge tell us? It reveals an era that believed the entire cosmos could be understood through a single divine lens, and that the purpose of learning was to illuminate that sacred order, not to question it. This Christian encyclopedia sought to gather every flower of knowledge into one perfect bouquet. From this totalizing vision of a world explained by faith, we now encounter a codex dedicated to preserving the starkly practical science of a fallen empire. Monumental in both size and purpose, the Codex Amiatinus is the largest and most complete Latin Vulgate Bible to survive from the early medieval world. Crafted in the twin monasteries of Wearmouth Jarrow in Northumbria around the year 716, this was no ordinary book. It was a diplomatic gift of staggering ambition, intended for the tomb of St. Peter in Rome, a physical offering from the edge of the known world to the very heart of Christendom. Weighing over 75 pounds and requiring the hides of an estimated 500 cattle to produce its vellum pages, its creation was an act of profound piety and a stunning display of institutional wealth. The project was initiated by the abbot Ceolfrith, who had inherited a magnificent library collected by the founder, Benedict Biscop, from his own travels to Rome. This was not an isolated scriptorium working in a vacuum. To ensure the absolute textual purity of their Bible, the monks consulted an ancient Italian manuscript, a pandect believed to have come from the library of Cassiodorus, ensuring their copy was a direct and uncorrupted descendant of St. Jerome's original translation. The book itself is a masterpiece of cultural fusion. Its elaborate decoration showcases the unique insular art of the British Isles, with intricate, interlacing patterns adorning its pages. Yet its most famous illustration, a painting of the scribe Ezra, is executed in a style that deliberately echoes classical Italian models, a conscious nod to the source of its authority. For biblical scholars, the Codex Amiatinus is the gold standard. It is the most accurate witness to Jerome's Vulgate text centuries before the printing press, its meticulous script preserving readings that had become corrupted in other copies. Its journey was as epic as its conception. Abbot Ceolfrith, now an old man, set out himself to deliver the massive book to Rome, a final pilgrimage. He died on the journey in Gaul, but the book completed its mission, a silent, powerful ambassador from a land once considered barbaric. How does the sheer scale and cost of this single book reflect the value placed on Scripture? It proves that in the early medieval mind, the Word of God was worth a kingdom's ransom, an object worthy of consuming a monastery's entire economic output for years. This was faith made tangible, 1,000 pounds of vellum and ink declaring that divine truth was the ultimate measure of a civilization's worth. From this monumental testament to sacred text, we shift to a different kind of ancient authority, one written not in scripture but in the precise language of lines and angles. A prayer book from a Jerusalem monastery held a secret beneath its devout surface. This is the Archimedes Palimpsest, a 13th century devotional text that was once something entirely different. Its original pages were a 10th century Byzantine codex containing the works of the legendary Greek mathematician Archimedes. In a common practice of the era, the precious parchment was scraped clean and washed, its original ink removed to make way for new prayers. The old knowledge was literally erased to serve a new faith, a ghost in the vellum waiting for a technology that could give it voice again. That original codex was the only known copy of several of Archimedes' most revolutionary treatises. His work, The Method of Mechanical Theorems, was preserved nowhere else. Within its recovered lines, Archimedes reveals his thought process, using concepts of infinity and infinitesimals to calculate areas and volumes. He was essentially performing calculus, a branch of mathematics that would not be formally invented by figures like Newton and Leibniz for another 1,800 years. He was playing with the infinite, a conceptual leap that separated him from all his contemporaries. Another text, the Stomachion, seems at first to be a simple puzzle involving 14 geometric shapes that can be rearranged into a square. But Archimedes was not merely playing a game. His writings show he was exploring the combinatorics of the shapes, calculating the number of ways they could be reassembled. This was an early, profound investigation into the mathematics of combinations, a field that would only blossom in the 20th century. The process of recovering these texts is a story of modern technological wizardry. Scholars used multispectral imaging, a technique that photographs the pages under different wavelengths of light, from ultraviolet to infrared. The faint chemical traces of the original iron gall ink, buried beneath the newer writing and centuries of grime, absorb and reflect this light in unique ways. Advanced computer algorithms then process these countless images, isolating the spectral signature of the original Archimedes text and making it legible for the first time in centuries. This was not a simple task of magnification. It was a digital excavation, peeling back layers of history without touching the fragile page. The survival of this single palimpsest fundamentally rewrote the history of science. It proved that the seeds of calculus and combinatorics were not sown in the 17th century, but were alive in the mind of a single genius in ancient Syracuse. What does the recovery of these lost works tell us about the fragility of knowledge? It reveals that our entire understanding of intellectual history can hinge on a single, reused book, a manuscript saved from oblivion by the very act of being erased. From this ghostly text of Greek mathematics rescued by light, we travel to the Andes, where a civilization recorded its world not with ink but with knots. A civilization without alphabetic writing kept its records in a language of knots and colors. This is the Khipu, the intricate corded device used by the Inca and earlier cultures of the Andes. To the untrained eye, it looks like an elaborate tassel, a bundle of hanging cords in a vibrant array of dyed cotton and wool. But this was a sophisticated three-dimensional database, a physical archive that recorded the vast wealth and history of the largest empire in the Americas. Its very existence challenges everything we assume about how a complex society must record its knowledge. The structure of a Khipu is a marvel of systematic design. A single primary cord acts as the spine from which dozens, sometimes hundreds of pendant cords are suspended. The type of knot, its position on the cord, and even the spin and ply of the string itself carried specific meanings. The Inca used a base 10 numerical system, and the Khipu reflected this perfectly. Different knot types represented ones, tens, hundreds, and so on, their placement along a cord creating a readable sequence of numbers that could log everything from tributes of corn to the population of a distant province. For a long time, scholars believed Khipus were merely accounting tools, the spreadsheets of the ancient Andes, but recent breakthroughs suggest they held far richer information. Certain Khipus appear to be narrative, potentially recording historical events, laws, and even poetry. This points to a semasiographic system where meaning is conveyed directly through symbols and spatial relationships, bypassing the need for sounds or an alphabet. It is a form of writing, but one that operates on a completely different principle than the scripts of Europe or Asia. Researchers are now acting like forensic linguists, comparing Khipus from different regions and periods, looking for repeating patterns that could represent names, places, or standard phrases. They are painstakingly building a decipherment that does not rely on a colonial-era Rosetta Stone, but on statistical analysis and a deep understanding of Andean culture itself. How does this corded archive force us to rethink our definition of literacy? We often equate writing with marks on a flat surface, but the Khipu proves that information can be woven, knotted, and felt. It represents a tactile, portable, and incredibly durable form of memory, one that could be read by trained specialists who understood its complex visual and tactile language. The ongoing decipherment of the Khipu is not just about recovering lost data. It is about validating an entire intellectual tradition that Europeans failed to recognize as writing, and in doing so, unlocking a uniquely American voice from the past. From this revolutionary system of knotted cords, we return to a world of ink and prophecy, to a codex filled with fire and divine judgment. A 9th-century monk dipped his brush into a pool of vibrant color, preparing to give form to the final, terrifying visions of the Christian world. The Trier Apocalypse, created at the Abbey of St. Maximin, is one of the earliest and most complete illuminated copies of the Book of Revelation. Its pages do not merely contain the words of the prophecy, they unleash them in a torrent of vivid imagery that would define the Western idea of the apocalypse for centuries. This was a book designed to be seen and felt as much as to be read. transforming abstract prophecy into an unforgettable sensory experience for a largely illiterate society. The artist translated the dense, symbolic language of the biblical text into a coherent and dramatic visual narrative. He depicted the four horsemen charging forth as distinct agents of conquest, war, famine, and death, each rendered with a chilling specificity. The multi-headed beast rising from the sea was given a tangible, monstrous form, and the heavenly Jerusalem descended as a glittering, architecturally perfect city. These were not casual decorations, they were theological interpretations in their own right, guiding the viewer on how to understand and internalize these complex, often frightening, divine messages. The artistic style of the Codex is a fascinating fusion of traditions. It carries the dynamic energy and intricate interlaced patterns characteristic of insular art from the British Isles, blended with the more classical figures and architectural elements inherited from Byzantine models. This hybrid style reflects the cosmopolitan nature of Charlemagne's court, where artists and manuscripts from across Europe were gathered and synthesized into a new imperial aesthetic. How does seeing a prophecy change its power over the faithful? The Trier Apocalypse demonstrates that visualization makes the abstract immediate and the distant imminent. A community hearing about the beast is one thing. A community seeing its grotesque form leering from a parchment page is another entirely. The emotional impact was profound, making the stakes of salvation and damnation feel intensely personal and real. These illustrations became the definitive prototypes, their iconography copied and adapted in churches and manuscripts across the medieval world, ensuring that this Carolingian artist's vision of the end times would become Europe's collective nightmare and dream for the next 500 years. This codex proves that art does not just illustrate text, it actively shapes belief, turning words into worlds that entire cultures can step into. From these vivid visions of a world's end, we now turn to a codex dedicated to a meticulous exploration of the world as it is, a breathtaking encyclopedia of the natural sciences. Gold leaf and lapis lazuli illuminate the constellations on a Carolingian parchment page. The Leiden Aratea is a 9th century masterpiece, a Latin translation of a Greek astronomical poem written by Aratus centuries before the Common Era. This was not a dry scientific manual. It was a lyrical journey through the night sky, where mythology and observation merged into a single, beautiful system. Each constellation is presented as a vivid painting, a heroic figure or animal frozen in time against a deep blue background. These are not random illustrations. They are precise celestial maps, with stars meticulously marked as golden dots upon the bodies of the gods and beasts they were said to represent. The poem itself, the Phenomena, describes the arrangement of the stars and the weather signs they foretold, turning the sky into a divine clock and calendar. A rising constellation might signal the time to plant crops, while the position of another could warn of an approaching storm. This codex was a crucial link in a fragile chain of knowledge. Its paintings are believed to be direct copies of a lost late antique archetype, making them the clearest window we have into how the Greeks themselves visualized their star lore. It captures the cosmology of Ptolemy and his predecessors at the very moment it was being rescued from the wreckage of the Roman world. For a Carolingian noble or monk studying this book, the cosmos was an ordered, intelligible whole, governed by divine laws that could be read in the movements of the stars. What role did such a beautiful scientific text play for the medieval elite? It was both an educational tool and a symbol of power. Understanding the heavens was a form of wisdom that connected a ruler to the divine order itself, proving his fitness to govern on earth. The Leiden Aratea exemplifies the Carolingian Renaissance not as a mere copying project, but as a conscious act of cultural salvage, ensuring that the cosmic knowledge of the classical world would guide future generations. From this harmonious vision of a mapped and storied sky, we descend into a world of hidden meanings and volatile transformations, to a codex that is a labyrinth of alchemical symbolism. A strange and beautiful dragon devours its own tail, coiled within a fountain of blood. This is just one of the mesmerizing images from the Ripley Scroll, a 15-foot-long illustrated manuscript that charts the alchemical quest for the Philosopher's Stone. Attributed to the 15th century English alchemist George Ripley, these scrolls are not simple instruction manuals. They are dense, allegorical roadmaps, a secret visual language designed to guide the initiate through the stages of the great work, the process of spiritual and material perfection. The vivid imagery is a code. A king and queen in union symbolize the necessary conjunction of sulfur and mercury, the fundamental principles of matter. The pelican, feeding its young with its own blood, represents a crucial distillation stage where substances are circulated and purified. Every fountain, dragon, and celestial body is a piece of a grand puzzle, each stage moving the alchemist closer to the ultimate goal, the creation of the red powder that could allegedly transmute base lead into pure gold and grant eternal life. For historians, these scrolls are not records of failed chemistry. They are the ultimate expression of a world where the laboratory and the chapel were one and the same. The process of transmutation was not seen as a mere physical trick, but as a sacred art, a spiritual journey where the alchemist had to purify their own soul in tandem with the materials in their flask. The base metal was a metaphor for the unenlightened human spirit, and gold represented its perfected divine state. Why cloak these processes in such impenetrable symbolism? The code protected the knowledge from the uninitiated, ensuring that only those who had undergone the proper spiritual preparation could understand and safely wield the power it described. It also acknowledged that the transformation being described was ultimately ineffable, a mystery that could only be hinted at through parable and picture. The Ripley Scroll reveals a time when the quest for knowledge was inseparable from the quest for God, a world where every experiment was a prayer and every chemical reaction a glimpse of the divine. This mystical fusion of matter and spirit gives way now to a document of startling practicality, a codex that records the mundane, heartbreaking details of medieval life in the wake of unimaginable tragedy. A sacred text's borders teem with the earthy vitality of 14th century England. The Luttrell Psalter, commissioned by the wealthy landowner Sir Geoffrey Luttrell around 1340, is an illuminated prayer book that has captivated historians not for its central Latin verses, but for the riot of life spilling from its margins. Here, amidst the sacred psalms, peasants till the soil with heavy plows drawn by oxen. Women knead dough in bustling kitchens, and musicians play bagpipes and fiddles at lively feasts. The pages burst with scenes of a mock tournament where villagers joust on goats, a moment of pure, unscripted humor frozen in ink and color. This is not just decoration, it is a sprawling, visual archive of a world usually hidden from history. Formal documents of the era record the deeds of kings and bishops, but the Psalter's marginalia captures the sweat, the tools, and the daily rhythms of the common people. We see the precise design of a carpenter's saw, the cut of a laborer's tunic, and the humble architecture of a timber frame house. It reveals the entire social hierarchy, from the knightly Sir Geoffrey himself, depicted in full armor, down to the lowest farmhand scattering seed. What was the purpose of this whimsical invasion of the sacred space? Perhaps it was simply for the entertainment of the book's owner, a rich man's fancy to see his own world reflected in his most precious possession. Maybe the artist, gifted with extraordinary talent and an observant eye, filled the empty spaces with the life he knew best. It could even be a form of social commentary, acknowledging the vast, laboring class whose toil made Sir Geoffrey's comfort possible. Whatever the original intent, the effect now is transformative. The Luttrell Psalter shatters the notion that medieval manuscripts were solely spiritual objects. It proves they could also be vibrant, secular portraits, capturing the laughter and labor that formed the true backbone of society. What can a doodle of a man wrestling a pig tell us about the past? It reminds us that history is not only written in laws and battles, but in the mundane, beautiful details of everyday existence. From this intimate portrait of English rural life, our journey takes a dramatic shift in scale to a codex that sought to capture the entire known world of a fallen empire. A book bound in the 4th century still holds secrets that reshape modern faith. The Codex Vaticanus, one of the world's oldest surviving Bibles, has been a guarded treasure of the Vatican Library for over 500 years. Written on fine vellum in an elegant, unadorned script known as Biblical Majuscule, its pages present a text far older than the familiar King James Version. This codex is a foundational pillar for biblical scholars, a key witness to the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew Scriptures, and to a New Testament that circulated before ecclesiastical authorities standardized its every word. Its very existence reveals an early Christian world alive with textual diversity, where different communities often used slightly different versions of their most sacred writings. When Renaissance scholars like Erasmus finally gained access to its pages, they discovered startling variations. Entire passages, such as the dramatic account of the woman caught in adultery found in the Gospel of John, were missing from its ancient leaves. The ending of the Gospel of Mark was shorter, concluding with the fearful women fleeing from the empty tomb. These were not errors, but evidence of a living, evolving textual tradition. The work of textual criticism is like a grand digital restoration of a classic film, where scholars compare every surviving scrap, from tiny papyrus fragments to massive codices like this one, to meticulously reconstruct the original script, stripping away centuries of accidental additions and scribbled tweaks. The Vaticanus, with its pristine 4th century form, is one of the most trusted sources for this painstaking work, directly influencing the footnotes and translations in modern Bibles that note disputed passages. Its physical history is a story of its own. Pages are missing, its final sections lost to time. Later hands, perhaps centuries after its creation, added ink corrections in the margins, attempts to bring this older version into line with newer textual traditions. These very corrections highlight the tension between preserving an ancient source and conforming to contemporary orthodoxy. How does the existence of such a manuscript, with its undeniable variations, impact our understanding of the Bible? It transforms it from a monolithic text handed down perfectly intact into a profoundly human document, transmitted lovingly but imperfectly by generations of scribes. The Codex Vaticanus and its sibling, the Codex Sinaiticus, pull back a curtain on the vibrant, contested centuries when Christianity was defining itself, reminding us that the words millions hold sacred have a complex and recoverable history. From this deep dive into the foundational texts of faith, we pivot to a codex that captures an entirely different kind of rebirth, the explosive creativity of the Italian Renaissance. A private notebook written in a mirrored script reveals a mind operating without limits. The Codex Leicester, 72 pages compiled by Leonardo da Vinci between 1506 and 1510, is not a formal treatise but a raw torrent of scientific inquiry. Its pages, filled with his distinctive left-handed script written in reverse from right to left, feel like a direct tap into his synaptic flow, a private conversation with nature that he never intended for public eyes. This was the laboratory of his intellect, a space free from the demands of patrons or the rigid doctrines of university learning. He questioned everything from the authoritative texts of Aristotle to the very nature of light and water, trusting only the evidence gathered by his own senses and experiments. His investigations into fossils are a stunning example of this empirical leap. Where his contemporaries might have attributed seashells found on mountaintops to the biblical flood, Leonardo correctly deduced that those lands must have once been seafloors, later lifted by immense, slow-moving geological forces. He observed the intricate patterns in fossilized shells, noting they were identical to living creatures, and argued they could not have been formed by any fleeting deluge. His mind connected disparate clues to arrive at a truth that geology would not formally embrace for another 300 years. The Codex is equally profound in its study of hydraulics. Leonardo filled pages with intricate diagrams of eddies, vortices, and flowing water, dissecting its behavior with an artist's eye for form and an engineer's grasp of function. He explored how water sculpts the earth, how air bubbles rise, and how to harness this power. His theories on the nature of light and the brilliance of the moon, which he correctly theorized reflected sunlight from a textured surface of water and land, further showcase his relentless drive to understand the world as a unified mechanical system. What separates this notebook from a polished academic text is its beautiful, unfinished chaos. It is a map of a thought process, complete with false starts, revised diagrams, and questions left hanging. This is where genius works, not in the presentation of final answers, but in the messy, passionate, and iterative act of questioning. The Codex redefines Leonardo not as a mere painter who dabbled in science, but as a preeminent natural philosopher whose deepest insights remained locked away for centuries, a lost revolution in thought. How much further might our world have advanced if these restless, private speculations had been shared with his contemporaries? The personal notebook captures the lightning of discovery before it is tamed, a glimpse into the very engine of innovation. From this intimate record of a singular Renaissance mind, we find a different kind of key, one that unlocked the history and language of an entire hemisphere. A ritual unfolds across a single long sheet of deer hide, folded into a screen. The Codex Cospi is a blaze of color and intricate pictograms, a direct portal into the ceremonial life of central Mexico before European contact. Created likely in the 15th century, this pre-Columbian manuscript belongs to the Borgia group, a family of sacred books sharing a complex visual language. Unlike the Codex Mendoza, which was made for Spanish eyes, the Cospi was created by and for indigenous priests, its meaning encoded in a system of symbols entirely free from colonial interpretation. Its pages are not a linear history, but a spiritual tool for navigating the cycles of time and the will of the gods. At its heart lies the 260-day sacred calendar, a Mesoamerican clock that dictated the rhythm of existence. This was the Tonalpohualli, a continuous cycle of 20-day signs combined with the numbers 1 through 13. Each unique combination carried a specific fate, an omen for the day that guided everything from naming ceremonies to declarations of war. The Codex acts as a divinatory almanac, its pages mapping out these cycles and illustrating the deities and rituals associated with them. We see the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, a god of wind and wisdom, presiding over certain periods. Other pages show priests engaged in auto-sacrifice, drawing blood from their own tongues or ears as a supreme offering to nourish the gods and maintain the cosmic order. These scenes are not depictions of violence for its own sake, but of a sacred covenant, a reciprocal relationship where human devotion sustained the universe itself. How can we truly decipher a spiritual system that thinks in images instead of paragraphs? The challenge is immense. without a living tradition to explain them. Each vibrant page is a puzzle. A simple-looking bundle might represent a specific offering of copal incense, while a particular gesture of a deity's hand could signify a particular type of blessing or curse. Epigraphers painstakingly compare symbols across the Borgia group codices, looking for repeating patterns and contextual clues to slowly rebuild this lost vocabulary. The Codex Cosby proves that Mesoamerican civilization possessed a sophisticated intellectual tradition of astrology, theology, and ritual science, a system of knowledge that operated on principles completely alien to European minds. It forces us to acknowledge that a civilization can be profoundly literate without a single alphabetic letter, and that its most profound truths were written not in words, but in a symphony of color and symbol. From this vibrant Mesoamerican screenfold, our search for knowledge written on rare materials leads us to the high Himalayas, where a unique codex was inscribed not on parchment, but on the bark of a tree. A sacred cave sealed for 1,000 years preserved the world's oldest dated printed book. In the year 868, a Chinese man named Wang Jai commissioned a copy of the Diamond Sutra, a foundational text of Mahayana Buddhism, and had it printed using carved wooden blocks. This long scroll, discovered in a hidden library cave at Dunhuang along the Silk Road, is not a codex in form, but it is a codex in spirit, a preserved vessel of ancient wisdom that fundamentally rewrote history. Its final lines, a colophon, state it was created for universal free distribution, an act of religious merit that reveals a sophisticated printing culture flourishing in Tang Dynasty China. This was not a primitive experiment. The clarity of the Chinese characters and the presence of an intricate frontispiece illustration show woodblock printing was already a mature, refined technology, perfected for the mass reproduction of sacred texts centuries before the technique would appear in Europe. The content of the sutra itself is a profound philosophical exploration. It is a discourse between the Buddha and a disciple named Subhuti, focusing on the perfection of wisdom and the concept of sunyata, or emptiness. The text uses radical, paradoxical dialogue to dismantle the listener's attachment to fixed concepts and perceptions. It famously states that all conditioned phenomena are like a dream, an illusion, a bubble, a shadow, like dew or a lightning flash. This was not a denial of the world's appearance, but a deep inquiry into its ultimate, unfixed nature, challenging the very idea of a solid, independent self. The decision to use the new technology of printing for this specific text is deeply significant. It speaks to a desire to disseminate this complex spiritual teaching as widely as possible, to generate immense merit by making it accessible to all. This was the democratization of enlightenment, using cutting-edge technology to propagate ancient truths. The discovery of the Diamond Sutra scroll, along with tens of thousands of other manuscripts in the Dunhuang Library cave, created an unparalleled archive of Silk Road life. How does the use of printing for spiritual dissemination redefine the relationship between faith and innovation? It shows that some of humanity's greatest technological leaps were driven not just by commerce or power, but by a profound yearning to share wisdom, to multiply devotion, and to ensure that a voice from the past could speak to millions in the future. This printed whisper from a desert cave proves that the impulse to preserve and share knowledge is a powerful engine of human progress. From this printed scripture born of faith and technology, we return to Europe and a codex filled with a very different kind of secret, one meant for the human body rather than the soul. A medieval woman's health rested in the hands of other women, and the Trotula Manuscripts give those hands a voice. This ensemble of texts, emerging from the vibrant medical school of Salerno in the 12th century, stands as a monumental work on women's medicine. Attributed to a female physician named Trotula de Rogero, its very existence shatters the simplistic stereotype of a Middle Ages devoid of female practitioners. The collection became the standard reference for gynecology, obstetrics, and even cosmetics for centuries, circulating in countless manuscript copies across Europe. Its pages are filled with remarkably practical advice, from aiding difficult childbirth to treating menstrual pain and enhancing fertility. This was not abstract speculation, it was a working manual for healing, blending the classical theory of the four humours with proven folk remedies and direct empirical observation. A recipe for a soothing salve might sit beside a charm to be recited, showing a world where practical care and spiritual comfort were intertwined. The debate over its authorship is itself revealing. Some scholars argue it is the work of multiple hands, a compilation of knowledge from Salerno's renowned female healers, perhaps later consolidated under Trotula's famous name. Others see the clear, cohesive voice of a singular, brilliant female physician. Regardless of the precise origin, its widespread use proves that this was knowledge deemed essential, copied and translated repeatedly to meet a persistent need. How does the recovery of such a focused text alter our view of gender and medicine? It forces us to acknowledge a hidden world of female expertise operating alongside, and often within, the formal medical schools. The Trotula provides a precious window into the intimate health concerns of medieval women, topics often ignored by male chroniclers. It reveals a sophisticated tradition of women caring for women, their empirical knowledge passed down and refined through generations, ensuring that the most fundamental aspects of life, birth, health, and well-being were entrusted to experienced, dedicated hands. From this profound insight into the care of the body, our final codices lead us inward to a monument of personal devotion crafted for a solitary soul. Every line of the Book of Kells seems to vibrate with a sacred energy, a visual symphony of spirals, knots, and beasts woven into the very words of the Gospel. Created on a remote island monastery of Iona or Kells in the 9th century, this manuscript is the ultimate expression of Hiberno-Saxon art, where decoration does not merely accompany the text, it envelops it, becoming a form of wordless preaching. The pages are so dense with intricate patterns, so alive with interlacing serpents and peacocks, that the Latin script itself becomes another layer of ornamentation. To open this book was to step into a vision of heaven's ordered chaos, a cosmos where every space was filled with divine presence and meaning. Art historians call this the horror vacui, a fear of empty space, but it was far more than an artistic choice. It was a theological statement, a belief that the glory of God's word required a visual splendor so overwhelming it could only be expressed through near impossible complexity. The famous Cairo page, which introduces the story of Christ's birth in the Gospel of Matthew, is the pinnacle of this ambition. The name comes from the first two letters of Christ's name in Greek, Chi and Rho, which the artist has exploded into a monumental, swirling tapestry. These two letters become a framework for an entire universe of decoration. Within their curves, you can find otters catching fish, moths with delicate wings, and cats watching them all woven together with ribbons of color that defy logical construction. The amount of labor is staggering, with pigments like ultramarine blue made from precious lapis lazuli, which had to travel from Afghanistan to this windswept Irish coast. This was not the work of a single scribe, but a team of master artists and scribes laboring for years, perhaps decades, in a scriptorium where the act of copying was itself a form of prayer. What is the effect of transforming a text into an object of such overwhelming beauty? It elevates reading into an act of meditation, forcing the viewer to slow down, to get lost in the details, and to understand that the message is not just in the words, but in the glorious, time-consuming effort required to present them. The Book of Kells proves that during Europe's so-called Dark Ages, the light of learning and artistic genius burned with an almost blinding intensity in the remote outposts of Irish monasticism. This gospel book was less a thing to be read quickly and more a portal to be contemplated, a sacred object that used its own breathtaking artistry to argue for the infinite wonder of its message. From this island of unparalleled artistry, our journey follows the path of conquest across the ocean to a codex that documented a world being violently remade. A 12-volume encyclopedia of a living world written in the shadow of its destruction, the Florentine Codex is unlike any other document from the Americas. Compiled over 3 decades by the Franciscan friar Bernardino de Sahagun, this 2,000-page masterpiece was a rescue mission. Working in the years following the Spanish conquest of Mexico, Sahagun realized that the intricate fabric of Aztec civilization was unraveling, its elders dying, and its traditions being systematically erased. His response was a project of staggering ambition to capture the totality of that vanishing world. He did not work alone. He assembled a team of elite Nahua scholars and artists, men who had been educated in both their own traditions and in European schools, and together they created a work that is both a product of its colonial time and a profound challenge to it. The very structure of the Codex reveals its dual nature. Its pages are divided into parallel columns, one preserving the Nahuatl language exactly as spoken by the elders, and the other providing a Spanish translation. This was not just a translation, it was a deliberate act of preservation, ensuring that the original voice, with all its nuance and cultural specificity, would not be lost. Surrounding this bilingual text are hundreds of vivid illustrations drawn in a hybrid style, blending pre-Columbian pictographic traditions with emerging European artistic conventions. Sahagun's methodology was revolutionary. He developed detailed questionnaires and conducted structured interviews with Nahua elders, cross-checking their accounts to ensure accuracy. He was, in effect, inventing the tools of modern ethnography more than 3 centuries before the discipline would formally exist. He asked about everything. The Codex details the vast Aztec pantheon, not just the well-known gods like Huitzilopochtli and Quetzalcoatl, but also the lesser deities of rain, maize, and pulque. It describes social structures from the emperor's court to the commoner's home. It catalogues the natural world with the precision of a naturalist, documenting animals, plants, and minerals, along with their medicinal and practical uses. One of its most powerful and haunting sections is Book 12, which provides a detailed narrative of the Spanish conquest from the perspective of the Nahua people themselves. Here, the invaders are not heroic explorers, but bewildering, ruthless figures whose arrival was an unmitigated catastrophe. We read descriptions of the Spaniards' greed for gold, the terror of their guns and horses, and the devastating spread of smallpox that decimated the population. This is history written not by the victors, but by the vanquished, a raw and immediate account of a world collapsing. The Codex is filled with profound and unsettling contradictions. It was created under the auspices of the Catholic Church, with the stated goal of understanding native culture in order to more effectively eradicate its idolatrous beliefs. Yet, in its meticulous effort to record those beliefs, it ended up preserving them for posterity. The Nahua collaborators were not passive informants. They were active shapers of the record, making strategic choices about what to include, what to emphasize, and how to frame their own history for a Spanish friar and a European king. Whose voice ultimately speaks from these pages? It is a chorus, a complex and sometimes dissonant blend of the friars' scholarly intent and the natives' determined will to be remembered. The Florentine Codex stands as a monumental paradox, a colonial document that became the single greatest defense against cultural oblivion. It forces us to ask how history is written in the aftermath of catastrophe, and whether a work born from the impulse to control can ultimately serve the cause of liberation. From this collaborative effort to document a conquered civilization, our search for foundational texts leads us to a discovery that would challenge the very bedrock of faith unearthed in a desert monastery. A young Bedouin shepherd tossed a stone into a cave opening, hoping to scare out a lost goat. He heard not a bleat but the shatter of clay. Inside, he found several tall jars, and within them not treasure, but bundles of ancient leather and papyrus scrolls. This chance moment in 1947 began the greatest manuscript discovery of the 20th century, the unearthing of the Dead Sea Scrolls from the caves of Qumran. Over the next decade, searchers would recover thousands of fragments from nearly 1,000 different manuscripts, a vast library hidden in the desert for 2,000 years. This was not a single codex, but a collective archive, a time capsule sealed during a period of intense religious and political upheaval in Judea. The contents were revolutionary. They included the oldest copies of the Hebrew Bible by a millennium, pushing our evidence back from the Middle Ages to the time of Christ. When scholars compared the great Isaiah scroll from Qumran to the medieval Masoretic text, the version that forms the basis of most modern Old Testaments, they were stunned. The text was virtually identical, a remarkable confirmation of the meticulous care Jewish scribes had taken over centuries to preserve their sacred scriptures. Yet the scrolls also revealed a world of textual diversity, with other manuscripts showing slight variations, proving that before the canon was firmly fixed, multiple versions of some biblical books circulated. Alongside these biblical texts were sectarian writings, the unique literature of the community that lived at Qumran, widely believed to be the Essenes. The community rule lays out their strict, monastic-like way of life, detailing a rigorous initiation process, a code of conduct, and a shared communal property. Another scroll, the War Scroll, describes a final, apocalyptic battle between the sons of light and the sons of darkness, a 40-year conflict they believed was preordained and imminent. These texts unveil a Jewish world far more complex and diverse than previously understood. This was not a monolithic faith awaiting a single Messiah, but a landscape of competing sects, each with its own interpretation of Scripture and its own vision for the future. Some groups, like the one at Qumran, had withdrawn into the desert to prepare for God's final judgment, living in ritual purity and studying the law day and night. How does the discovery of this entire library, from the very time of Jesus and John the Baptist, reshape our view of religious history? It places the origins of both rabbinic Judaism and early Christianity squarely within this vibrant crucible of debate, messianic hope, and apocalyptic expectation. The scrolls show that the ideas expressed in the New Testament were not entirely new, but were part of a broader conversation happening within first-century Judaism. The voices from Qumran, preserved in jars against the desert dryness, give us the background noise to the most influential religious movements in Western history. They remind us that our deepest held traditions emerged from a world of passionate argument and fervent belief. This desert library provides the context for a spiritual revolution, and from its caves, our search for forgotten knowledge leads to one final, enigmatic volume, a book that has defied every attempt to read it. A book exists that no one on earth can read. The Voynich Manuscript is the world's most famous unsolved puzzle, a 15th-century codex filled with pages of an utterly unknown script, accompanied by drawings that defy logical explanation. Its vellum pages showcase a bizarre botanical garden of plants that have no counterpart in nature, with leaves and roots arranged in impossible configurations. Astrological charts feature unfamiliar constellations and nude female figures, often called nymphs, bathing in intricately plumbed green pools and tubes that suggest some hidden hydraulic or biological system. For over a century, this book has resisted every attempt at decipherment, from the best World War II codebreakers to the most advanced artificial intelligence. The script itself is the core of the mystery. It is written from left to right with a clear, flowing hand that suggests a real language or a sophisticated cipher. The text demonstrates patterns that look grammatical, with recurring word structures and a statistical profile similar to known tongues, yet it matches no alphabet or writing system ever documented. It is a locked door with no key in sight. The manuscript's journey through history is as enigmatic as its contents. It first definitively appears in the court of Holy Roman Emperor Rudolf II, a patron of alchemy and the occult, who reportedly purchased it for a small fortune. It later surfaced in the possession of a 17th-century alchemist, then vanished for centuries before being rediscovered by a Polish book dealer, Wilfrid Voynich, in 1912, from whom it takes its name. Today, it resides in the Boynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University, a permanent challenge to scholars and curious visitors alike. Theories about its purpose are as strange as its illustrations. Some believe it is an elaborate, meaningless hoax crafted to deceive a wealthy patron. Others argue it is a coded manual of heretical alchemical knowledge, its true meaning concealed to avoid persecution. Another compelling theory suggests it records a lost language, perhaps a constructed one, or documents a forgotten system of herbal medicine based on plants native to a now unidentified region. Its very indecipherability is its power. What is the value of a book that cannot be read? It serves as a profound monument to the limits of human understanding, a reminder that the past can guard its secrets with fierce tenacity. Our enduring obsession with the Voynich manuscript reveals a fundamental human trait, the relentless drive to solve puzzles and find meaning, even when faced with absolute silence. It is the ultimate symbol of the forgotten archive, a treasure chest whose contents remain perpetually out of reach, whispering that some mysteries are not meant to be easily solved. Having explored these 25 codices, from the cosmic charts of the Dresden Codex to the unreadable script of the Voynich, a common thread emerges. Each of these fragile survivors represents a voice snatched from the brink of oblivion. They are testaments to the fragility of knowledge and to the stubborn human will to preserve it against fire, conquest, and the slow erosion of time. They remind us that history is not a single, settled story, but a mosaic of countless perspectives, many of which were nearly lost forever. Their collective legacy is a warning against the arrogance of the present, and an invitation to wonder what other forgotten archives still lie hidden, waiting in jars, caves, or library vaults for the moment they can speak again. These fragile pages, rescued from caves and monasteries, tell a single, powerful story of loss and resilience. Time and again, knowledge survived through a combination of sheer luck and human determination, tucked away in sealed jars or hidden beneath newer prayers. The survival of these 25 codices was never guaranteed. Each one represents a narrow escape from the flames of conquest, the damp of a forgotten cellar, or the simple neglect of centuries. Their collective journey reveals that our understanding of the past is not a smooth, unbroken line, but a fractured mosaic, painstakingly reassembled from fragments saved by chance. These discoveries have consistently shattered the stories told by the victors. The Dresden Codex forced Europe to abandon its myth of primitive American cultures, while the Nag Hammadi Library exposed the vibrant diversity of early Christian belief that orthodoxy sought to erase. The Florentine Codex gave voice to the conquered, and the Khipu challenges our very definition of writing. Each codex is a testament to a sophisticated world we almost lost, from the mathematical genius of Archimedes to the astronomical precision of the Maya. They reveal a global network of inquiry where ideas on medicine, astronomy, and philosophy were being pursued from the Andes to the Himalayas, often in parallel. The physical book itself, the codex as an object, proved to be the crucial vessel. The sturdiness of vellum, the resilience of bark paper, the durability of knotted cords, these material forms preserved ideas that might have vanished if they existed only as spoken words. Knowledge does not move in a straight line. It flows in multiple streams, and history is often just the story of the one stream that happened to flow into the future, while others were deliberately dammed or simply dried up. These codices are the rediscovered tributaries, proving that what was suppressed or forgotten was often just as profound as what was preserved. What other archives have been lost completely, their voices silenced forever, and in our own digital age, what knowledge are we failing to preserve? Our vast digital archives exist on fragile servers and in formats that may become unreadable to future generations, a modern equivalent of a palimpsest waiting to be erased. These ancient books are not silent relics. They are active participants in a conversation across time, constantly challenging our assumptions and demanding we listen more carefully to the whispers from the past. Our journey across these 25 codices reveals a living past, a conversation with humanity itself echoing through fragile pages and knotted cords. We have walked with Mayan astronomers charting Venus, stood beside Visigoth scribes preserving their tongue, and peered over Leonardo's shoulder as he questioned the very nature of the world. These forgotten archives are not relics gathering dust. They are vibrant testaments to a universal human drive to understand the stars, to heal the body, to connect with the divine, and to leave a mark that says we were here. Each codex is a voice rescued from the silence, proving that history is never a single, fixed story written by the victors. It is a magnificent palimpsest where the erased writings of the vanquished, the heretic, and the overlooked still bleed through, waiting for a curious mind to read their truths. The survival of these texts is a powerful reminder of knowledge's fragility, saved by chance in a desert jar or hidden beneath a prayer book, yet their collective impact is monumental. They challenge the arrogance of the present, forcing us to admit how much we have forgotten and how much we still have to learn from those who came before. Let this exploration inspire you to see history not as a closed book on a shelf, but as an open archive filled with mysteries waiting for their solver and wisdom yearning to be reclaimed. The quest is never truly over. If this journey into the forgotten archives has ignited your own curiosity, I would love to hear which of these codices captured your imagination most in the comments below. Consider subscribing to continue unraveling the profound secrets of our shared past together. This journey through 25 rescued voices is merely a starting point. Our world remains a vast repository of secrets, its deserts and mountains still hiding undiscovered manuscripts, its library vaults guarding undeciphered scripts, and its forgotten archives waiting for the right moment to speak. You can become an active part of this ongoing search. Many of these incredible codices have been digitized in stunning detail, their pages available online for anyone to explore. You can trace the golden constellations of the Leiden Aratea or scrutinize the bizarre botany of the Voynich Manuscript from your own screen, joining a global community of amateur detectives and scholars. Share this exploration with fellow lovers of history, mystery, and the profound thrill of reclaiming a lost piece of our collective story. I am genuinely curious to hear which of these codices resonated most deeply with you. Did the recovered calculus of the Archimedes Palimpsest spark your imagination, or did the earthy vitality of the Luttrell Psalter's marginalia draw you into the medieval world? Perhaps the silent challenge of the Voynich Manuscript captivates your sense of wonder. Your thoughts and conversations in the comments below help keep these ancient dialogues alive. If you want to continue unraveling history's greatest secrets with me, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Together, we can keep unveiling the forgotten archives that redefine our understanding of humanity's incredible journey.